Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, I did something that I never do. I shouldn't say never do. I rarely do, and that's dust this studio because we have lots of people coming in today, including the mayor, who I'm going to chat with in a moment, and we got our councillors, Nancy Hatling and Billy Gillis, and we got Paul Palango coming in later as well to talk about his book, The Anatomy of a Cover-Up the Truth About the RCMP and the Nova Scotia Massacres. So I figured it was time to dust the place off. What do you think, Mr. Mayor? Nice and clean for you or what?
I haven't sneezed once. It's looking really sharp in here, Todd. Thank you for cleaning up.
That's all right. And it gets you water as well?
You did. It's all service here. Thank you. Good concierge service.
Exactly. Well, all right. Thanks to Vanessa Van Ness, of course, on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. And we will be chatting with our councillors. Nancy Hatling and Billy Gillis will join me in just a little bit. But first, we want to talk to the mayor because I don't know if we would call this a bombshell, but pretty interesting on bike lanes. Pressing a pause on bike lanes, Mr. Mayor. Let everybody know what your motion is going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I'm doing what I said I would do in the election campaign, and that is to work to solve congestion and to spend taxpayers' dollars wisely. So that's what this motion is about. It's just a pause, and the motion, if passed, will bring back a list of the bike lane projects that are in the budget for the next 4 years. And put a little mark beside them, either a red light, which means that they are contributing to congestion, for example, by closing a lane or other ways contributing to congestion, or a green light for those projects that don't impact congestion one way or the other. And those projects with a green light will just sail right on ahead. So it's really, in the end, only pausing those projects that will impact congestion negatively. And then we'll talk about with the council colleagues how to redesign those so that they don't.
Okay, so how many projects does that include? How many would fall under the umbrella that need to be analyzed?
Well, we don't know, and that's the importance of the motion. We get that list back, and we can design a transportation system that works for everyone in a balanced and equitable way. I don't think I have to tell your listeners that congestion is bad in the recent ranking, right? We're third worst for congestion in the country, fifth worst in North America. It's we're spending 83 hours behind the wheel of our cars sitting in traffic in HRM right now. That's 12 working days a year, and that's not tenable.
Mm-hmm. And the costs, the costs have spiraled out of control. It was originally $20 million. It's now pushing $100 million, and I think it's safe to say that number is going to go up from that.
It always will go up, so it's quadrupled from 25 to 98 or so. Mm-hmm. We live in inflationary times, sure, but has anyone's rent or grocery bill gone up 4 times? No, it hasn't. So I think it's, congestion alone, the escalation in price alone, the fact that the provincial government has their new Link NS transportation plan about to be released alone, any one of those things alone is enough reason for this council to pause and take a look and figure out how to do things better.
Okay, do you feel as though there are some members of council that are hell-bent on this regardless of the cost? That it wouldn't matter what the report indicates, they feel as though it's got to go ahead?
I think there's some pride of authorship from some of the returning councillors that were part of creating the integrated mobility plan that positions congestion as a strategy. I want to say that again, positions congestion as a strategy to get people out of their cars into other modes of transportation. The problem is we haven't created those other modes. So we've taken away capacity without giving the other modes for the people in the cars to go. So I think there are some folks that are going to defend that congestion as a strategy. But, the important thing is here, Todd, that it not be a binary black and white, good, bad discussion. This is extremely complex. We need the council to dig into that complexity and do a rethink and make sure that we're delivering the best transportation system that works for every roadway user.
Okay, pride of authorship, that's an interesting turn of phrase. Any councillors in particular that you'd like to note?
Oh, look, I don't want to get into calling out which was on which
Sean
side. Well, I think Sean's made his position pretty clear on the internet over the weekend. But, the internet's the internet, and I'm looking forward to a really good debate based on the facts in the council chamber.
Okay, so one of the key arguments that David Hensby and councillors who are proponents of this made is that the federal dollars paid for a lot of it when it was $20 million. That's not the case anymore.
No, the $20 million from the federal government was a huge portion of it when it was a $25 million project. Yeah. Now we're at $100 million. So the federal share is down to something much, much smaller now. And the $77 extra million, the unexpected $77 million, are all coming off of the municipal tax rate. So that's something that the council needs to take seriously too, and I'm sure that they're hearing from their residents about that.
Okay, so is this more about cost, or is it more about planning or congestion, or is it a combination of all that?
It's a combination. It's a convergence of factors. The third worst congestion in Canada, quadrupling of the cost, the provincial transportation plan about to drop. This is all happening at the same time. So we need. I mean, how could we not take a pause and be responsible leaders and to look at this to do?
All right, but the argument could be made that congestion is exacerbated by vehicles, and this would lessen that.
And that's exactly what the integrated mobility plan says. It says a little bit of congestion can be used to move some drivers out of their cars into alternate modes. But the integrated mobility plan is also clear. You have to provide those other modes, like a BRT system, bus rapid transit system, like a everyday transit system that runs on time and is reliable. We haven't provided those options. We don't have that transit system. We have reduced capacity without providing alternatives for people, and that's why they're so frustrated, and that's why productivity is dropping in Halifax.
Okay, so widening of Robie and other, what about those projects?
So any project that's what we call in flight, the tenders have already been let, are not impacted by this. So a great example is the Windsor Street Exchange that we debated at council some months ago. That's I'll just pause on Windsor Street Exchange. That's a great example of an infrastructure project that actually meets the needs of every user group. Mm-hmm. It's got bus lanes, it's got lanes for cars and for delivery trucks, it's got bike lanes. It actually does present the balanced transportation solution that I would like to see throughout our network, and right now we're not giving that.
Okay, so an integrated active transportation, does it need to be contiguous, connected? Is that really is a key component to this, though, is it not?
That's right. We've got a bit of a jigsaw puzzle with many pieces missing right now. So the active transportation network is incomplete. That leads to low ridership. That leads to bike lanes appearing to be empty, which leads to frustration for the people stuck in the traffic beside them. So it's imperative that we build out this bike lane, and I really push back vigorously on anybody who draws a conclusion that I'm anti-bike. I'm a cyclist myself. I authored the National Active Transportation Strategy. I created a $400 million fund to fund this stuff when I was MP. But we need to be doing this right, and we need to complete the network in the correct way that is usable for everyone, that doesn't sacrifice the ability for the other roadway users, buses, trucks, cars, their ability to meet their needs as well.
All right, so what are you anticipating out of this report, the supplementary staff report?
A list of projects that are going to be built over the next 4 years in the capital budget, that'll either have a red light or a green light beside them. The green light projects will sail on as if nothing had happened, so that's great news for the bike network. The red light ones, I'm going to ask council and staff to do a redesign. For example, if a bike lane is currently designed to go down a major traffic thoroughfare by closing a vehicle lane, let's move that bike lane over to the quiet street, 1 or 2 streets over, where it's safer for the cyclist, a less costly infrastructure intervention over there. and we leave the lanes of traffic unimpeded on the main corridor. That's the kind of redesign I'm talking about.
Why has this not been done properly in the first place? I mean, we've gone down this road. How did we get to this point?
Well, I think that there were really good intentions in writing the integrated mobility plan. It was also written during COVID. That was a time when, you recall, there were very few cars on the street, and that was a lot of municipalities took advantage of that moment to advance in a really heavy-handed way the active transportation networks. And that's fine in cases like the multi-use pathways where it's not in the roadway, but it's a problem now that the pandemic is over, our city is bustling, our population is growing, and now we're in gridlock traffic. So conditions have changed from the optimistic and idealistic way that plan was written. We need to be real about how our city is performing right now. It can do much, much better.
Yeah, to me, that's just not an excuse. I mean, we knew that if you're writing a report or if you're developing a plan based on traffic patterns during a pandemic, and not anticipating that that's not going to be the reality moving forward, to me, that is short-sighted right there.
I think there was hope, and Halifax planners weren't alone. I think there was hope that people coming out of the pandemic would just somehow not get in their car when they went back to work, and that they would see these bike networks and just start using their bikes. We know that's not the case. Yeah. And it's not just people in their cars. It's people who drive a bus. It's people who have no choice but to ride on a bus to get to work. It's the delivery and commercial vehicles that keep our local economy moving. It's the emissions that congestion causes. It's the quality of life that happens. Mm-hmm. It's the drop in productivity that results from 12 working days a year sitting in traffic. And, Todd, that's at a time when Nova Scotia has just been granted the dubious distinction of having the lowest productivity per capita of any state in the United States and any province or territory in Canada. Dead last in productivity. And we, at the same time, have the 5th worst congestion in North America. How are we going to fix this?
Yeah. Okay, look, you knew that you were going to get some pushback from this. This in the Herald this morning. The Halifax Cycling Coalition is not happy with your efforts to pause new bike lane projects. Here's a quote from David Truman, chairman of the coalition that has 200 official members and a newsletter circulation to 1,700 citizens. Says, I'm flummoxed. There's an adjective. Disgusted. There's an adjective. A little known fact is that Halifax is the second highest rate of active transportation of all the cities in Canada. Why aren't we building upon that rather than trying to tear it down? What's your response?
I'm not sure what David would have read that said anything about tearing anything down. So he's getting off on the wrong foot with wrong facts there. I want this bike system built, but we have to do it in the right way. So can you read me the first part of what he said again? There was something in there.
A little known fact is that Halifax is the second highest rate of active transportation. That quote?
No,
or before that?
Before that.
It says, I'm flummoxed, disgusted. And he's not happy with your efforts to pause the bike lane projects. Again, chairman of the coalition that has 200 official members and a newsletter. That part?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for twigging what I wanted to say. So that, I mean, if I were the mayor of active transportation, I probably wouldn't be promoting this motion.
Right.
But I'm the mayor. My job is to be the mayor for all of HRM, for the people that ride on buses, for the people that drive delivery vans, for the people that need to get to work and to class on time. I'm the mayor for all of them. I don't have the luxury of picking one of the roadway user groups and championing them. It's my job to work for everybody. And that does not mean that the bike community will have any of their needs not met. I want to meet their needs just like I want to meet the needs of those other user groups. But it's my responsibility as a good city planner and as the mayor of a rapidly growing capital city in the 21st century to make sure that we're growing equitably and in a way that everybody has their needs met, not a select group.
Okay, so projecting out 10 years from now, God knows where we'll be, but let's suggest that in a decade, what's your vision for bike networks here in Halifax?
That it be complete, that people have alternative choices. I, like many people, don't exist only in one transportation mode. Some days I take my bike. Another day I need to take the ferry across the harbor. Another day I need to drive my car. Sometimes I need to rent a U-Haul. I know I use all of these modes. So in 10 years from now, we need a system that supports every user group equally and equitably in a city that is not brought to its knees by congestion.
Okay, I don't know if you conducted a straw poll or not of council, but what are your thoughts on getting this passed, this motion?
I just don't know, and it's a dangerous game to try to guess and to put words in people's mouths. So I'm just hoping that my council colleagues show up with an open mind and open ears and ready to listen to the complexity around this issue and not reduce it to a binary black and white stop go, bike good, may or bad kind of debate. It's not that. Our residents and our environment and our economy deserve for this council to take this very seriously and have a reasoned and complex debate worthy of the complexity of the subject.
Okay, so when all is said and done, you've got influence because you're the mayor, obviously. But when all is said and done, you're one vote, right?
That's correct.
But as the mayor, you have that influence that other councillors don't have.
Well, it's like I'm a councillor at large. I don't represent just one district. It's
right.
my job, and it's a sacred duty that I feel is to represent every resident of every district across HRM. I know that there are people in the north end of Halifax who have been offered jobs at a seniors facility in Hammonds Plains, can't afford to have a car, no bus to get there, unemployed as a result, at risk in their home. How does a bike lane help them?
Yeah.
We need a transit and transportation system that works for everybody.
Okay, so transit first, then bike lanes next. Is that kind of the vibe that I'm getting from you?
Oh, I think we have been pushing forward in an imbalanced way. The active transportation network has gotten out in front of our provision of the alternative modes like BRT, like rural transit. So we need to have everybody catch up and work together before we close lanes. So in the meantime, I want to redesign those bike lanes that are closing traffic lanes so that they don't impede the ability of those other roadway users to get where they need to go. Okay,
it'll be an interesting debate tomorrow, no doubt. I'm sure that you're expecting some heated conversation, likely.
Yeah, I think it'll be a rich and entertaining conversation. But at the end of it, I know that every person in that council chamber is there to do good work and to represent their people and to make the world a better place. And that's the outcome I'm looking for.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, appreciate you coming in and doing this, and we will follow up. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
That's Andy Fillmore, HRM Mayor. And when we come back, we've got our councillors on the hot seat, Nancy Hatling, Billy Gillis. We'll be back. All right, just had the mayor on. Now it's time to chat with our councillors, and it's time for you to have an opportunity to chat with the councillors as well. Here in studio, Nancy Hatling, District 13, Prospect Road, St. Margaret's. Nancy, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
All right, and Billy Gillis, District 15, Lower Sackville, Beaver Bank. Billy Gillis, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
All right, you got it. The way to reach us, folks, if you'd like to chat with the councillors, is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Nancy, what are you looking for?
Oh, I'm all good. Thanks.
Okay.
I was just checking to make sure that I brought all the right stuff in.
Okay,
Sorry about
there you
that,
go.
guys.
That's all right. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Okay, you heard Billy, I'll start with you. You heard the chat that I had with the mayor. What are your broad strokes thoughts on this motion? Are you supporting it?
Well, I'm leaning that way, and my main reason for leaning that way is the costs have ballooned out of control. 25 million, versus 100 million. That's a bridge too far for me.
Mm-hmm.
The lanes are important. I do support active transportation lanes, but at what cost, right?
Yeah.
We're getting out of control here for something that a small segment of the population uses, and I don't think it's ever going to be heavily used just because of our geography, the way it's laid out here.
Really? Okay. So in the Chronicle Herald this morning, David Truman, chairman of the coalition of bike users, I guess will use, or advocates of this. He's got a newsletter circulation around 1,700. Says a little known fact is that Halifax is the second highest rate of active transportation of all cities in Canada. You don't believe that?
Well, somebody's going to have to show me some hard and fast data because, I've been on the roads since the implementation of these in the last, 10 years or so, since these started coming forward. And I've been all over this city, all over the province, driving every day, walking, and just they're not used, enough to justify the costs.
Okay. Nancy, how about you? What's your take on this?
I mean, I'm going to arrive at council open-minded. I think it's important that we all do. Having said that, at first blush, my concern about this is that we are looking at a very expensive project. And what this motion particularly speaks to is the idea that we need to study it further and forklift it into a more expensive future. So based off of the economics that I'm looking at today, I'm struggling to understand why. Like we show up, and that could happen as part of the debate, but we show up with our homework done and say, like, I want to study this for this reason. I want to do X, Y, and Z, or, I want a staff report, requesting to do those things. What I'm looking at right now is that, are we going to do another expensive study to, again, like, nothing will get cheaper about this project in the future. So I don't immediately understand why we're pausing.
Well, the mayor said that the staff report was developed during COVID, and that a lot of the information that was derived or included came from numbers patterns during COVID, and that it needs to be updated because of that. What's your response?
Yeah, and he's more than welcome to bring that to the debate, right? Like, that's what the debate is for. I can really only speak to, I did listen to some of what he said here, but that is really the function of the debate, is that, we show up having done our homework. What the motion in particular speaks to is bike lanes are expensive, so we should study them. But my bigger concern, and as, the councillor of District 13, I'm here, I'm not trying to hold water for anybody. I'm if you look at my voting record, I voted in favor of the Windsor Street Exchange, even though we could only get a multi-use path in. What I'm looking at currently is an expensive project that's forklifted into a more expensive future. So I want to make sure that what we're doing actually makes financial sense.
Okay,
too.
But that said, and Billy, I'll throw this to you, financial sense, but we're spending $100 million. We got to make sure that it makes sense and that it's designed properly as well, right?
Absolutely. I think it's our duty as elected officials to at least have a look at this. Remember, this is only for a staff report. There's nothing binding about this. If we vote for this, it's not going to stop it.
Right.
But it's for a staff report to at least have a look at this, at the overages, I guess, to have a look at that, because the costs have ballooned out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Kurt. Hello, Kurt.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well.
Hi, Kurt.
Great. Hello. I just want to get a question. I listened to the mayor talk on this. I'm vehemently opposed to deferring the planned infrastructure, but I haven't heard, typically when staff reports are requested, the staff will determine how long it will take. I don't know how long this deferral and red dot, green dot will take. If you choose to go ahead with this, I think you should make it a demand from staff or from council on how quickly they want that report. And to support that, costs aren't going to go down by delaying these things.
Yeah.
And they're going to go up. I think it's really, really important that we expand the use of multi-purpose trails, AAA, whatever they're calling them. In Halifax, I ride and enjoy them practically every day, but I'm a retired guy. So if I could, I would like feedback on what do you think is a reasonable time for staff to come back if you choose to go that way, and I hope you don't.
Okay, Bill, let's start with you because you look like you're going to support that. So let's start with you.
Yes, thank you, Kurt. Staff reports do take quite a bit of time sometimes, depending on the topic. I'm hoping we can get this back expedited relatively quick, as there is tenders and everything out there right now. So I'm hoping it's not going to be too long.
Okay, Nancy? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and thank you very much for asking it. The other thing kind of that dovetails into that as well is that this motion as presented doesn't call out anything that we would be doing in the interim. So while we are doing this study, we're not doing anything else either.
The work is stopped?
Yeah, as I understand it. I mean, I think that'll have to be part of the debate tomorrow as well. But we don't have, while we're not doing this is what we're doing instead.
And so, sorry to interrupt you, but have any tenders been issued, and would they have to be?
No, as I understand it, those tenders are out, and again, I think that it would be worth it to listen to the debate tomorrow. Okay. But as I understand it, those tenders are out. They have not been awarded.
Okay.
So based off of what I read in the CBC, anything that has already been tendered is not going to be stopped. Mm-hmm. But the tenders that are currently out will not be awarded. That is the way that I understand it today. Billy's nodding his head in agreement with me, but that's another piece of this puzzle, right?
Yeah, well, who would want to bid on it at this point, right? Until this is cleaned up and cleared up, and
right. So I think you're right. I think it does kind of speak to, and this is, fundamentally one of my bigger concerns about this as well, is that, in the absence of us doing this, what are we doing? That's a really important piece of the puzzle. And two, how long does this take? This is asking for a study of all future, proposed tenders. So how many is that? Like, what is that going to take? Yeah. We don't have those answers in front of us.
Okay, Kurt, does that satisfy your question? Or?
Yep, that's great. If I could just add one comment. I know I worked on the Halifax Urban Greenway down here, and it's like 8 years ago. I understood there is an RFP out for proposals. It's taken them 8 years, and it would connect up from Beaufort down Franklin to Point Pleasant Park, getting traffic off there, and I'm not supporting that as a relieving commuter. But, is that thing going to be put on pause again for many, many years? But thank you for your input, and I'll hang up now.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kurt.
Thank you, Kurt.
Okay, 902-405-6000, that's what reaches. For Councillors on the hot seat, we've got Nancy Hatling and Billy Gillis here in studio taking your calls. 902-405-6000, we'll be right back. All right, continuing with our councillors, Nancy Hatling, District 13, Billy Gillis, District 15. Obviously, a lot of people talking about the mayor's motion, which council will debate tomorrow, concerning pressing pause on bike lane construction because of costs and planning. 902-405-6000. That's what it reaches, folks. Give us a call. Listen, whether you're for or against this thing, let's hear from you. Let's get your take on it. Steve, give us a call. Hello, Steve.
Good morning, Todd. Councillors.
Morning, Steve.
Yeah, I'm calling regarding the bike lanes. I'm on the road every day. I'm a delivery driver, so I'm all over the HRM. I don't see enough bikes on the road to warrant $100 million.
Okay, do you have a question, or?
Well, that's for the councillors. I mean, I wish they'd spend that much on the roads, because our roads are terrible.
Okay, Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for the feedback. We're always listening. This motion doesn't really address that, though. This motion is simply...
You get gas tax for the roads.
We need gas tax for the roads?
Gas tax for the bicycle lanes.
So you think we need bike lane tax?
There should be. For all that money to be spent on bike lanes and nothing's going on the roads.
Right. But yeah, just to kind of...
I've never seen the roads so horrible.
Right. Yeah. And I appreciate that. I really do. But just for the function of this motion isn't really saying, we're going to take, the money that we had, that we were going to put into bike lanes and put it into the roads. That's not really what this motion is about.
I mean, it just seems so easy for politicians to spend money when it's not theirs.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Believe me when I say that, nobody pays more attention than I do when it comes to spending money.
I like I said, I drive all over the city every day, and as a delivery driver, and everywhere, the roads are just horrendous.
Yeah.
Okay, Billy, what's your response to that?
I drive a brand new vehicle myself that I just bought in January, and you got to spend all the money to make your car roadworthy, but the roads ain't worthy for my new car.
Oh, I know. I've had to get my alignment done, I think, twice so far because of the potholes.
Billy, what's your response to that?
Yeah, Steve, thank you. I couldn't agree with you more, Steve. When we had a couple $1 million put into this and the feds and the province were contributing as well, I mean, in support of it, sure. But the cost overruns are usually left to the HRM, so I'm not in support of $100 million. Basically 70 some million.
Having to raise people's taxes again, to pay for these bike lanes, which it's not fair.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I mean, usage, I don't see a lot of people using it right now. The argument can be made, well, the network's not completed. But if you're going to decide to cycle to work or cycle to wherever you're going, you are going to do it regardless. I don't think the completion of the network is going to stop you from cycling. So, I mean, those are just my 2 cents. I mean, we'll see how the debate goes tomorrow, but...
I mean, I don't see enough cyclists around in my travels every day.
Okay, Steve, appreciate the call. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
902-405-6000. Billy, I will challenge you on that. I do think that if you had a really good connected bike network, that I don't know what the numbers would be, but I do believe that would motivate at least some people to use it. You don't agree with that?
Maybe a small number, Todd, but I don't think the mass population is nobody is going to be cruising in from Sackville, from Beaver Bank, from Bedford, from Fall River on a bike. A few people will, but there has to be uses there to justify the cost of this.
Yeah, you'd have to be quite a road warrior to be making that trek, regardless of how good the network is.
Yes,
I would agree with that. Nancy, do you?
Yeah, I don't. I sit on the other side of the fence compared to Councillor Gillis about that. I mean, I think that the value add for bike lanes, and again, I'm not here to hold water for
I understand.
But I mean, I think the net benefit of bike lanes for folks in Beaver Bank, for folks in Prospect, for folks in Tantallon, wherever it is that you are, the net benefit is that there are fewer cars on the road. And that helps everybody's traffic. You can argue about the numbers. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't think that it's a super useful argument to say, well, there aren't a lot of people using the bike lanes.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Nancy. The congestion on Prospect Road and St. Margaret's Road down to the roundabout is ridiculous, right? Yeah. Do you believe, honestly, and I'm not setting you up on any of this, do you honestly feel and believe that there's data that would indicate that building a network, which would be very expensive through that area, down to the roundabout, and then up through Chebucto and up into the Quinpool or whatever, that would relieve congestion?
I don't think that can be the only solution. No. But I mean, again, if I could, just say the quiet part out loud, bike lanes was never intended to be the sum and total of our traffic solution.
Right.
It never was. But more to the point, when we talk about this particular issue, are bike lanes the source of the traffic congestion? Mm-hmm. If you look at the roundabout, there are no bike lanes there. Yeah. So again, I'm kind of operating with the information in front of me, which is, are bike lanes causing traffic, which is the impetus of this motion.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Can we tackle congestion without active transportation and bike lanes?
I don't know. I mean, especially when it's already half built. Mm-hmm. Do I think that we should abandon the bike lane project? Is that your question to me?
No, my question is that you said that bike lanes alone will not fix congestion.
No.
You said that,
I don't
right?
think. No, I don't think that anybody is holding that position.
So that said, is bike lanes integral in concert with other things like a proper transit system or whatever redesign of choke points? Is it still a key component to fix congestion? Bike lanes.
Yeah. I mean, the integrated mobility plan has been around since 2017. Am I here to say that I think that bike lanes should be prioritized above all else? This is kind of the other unfortunate and uncomfortable part of where we are, is that this is not budget season. People are somehow just listening to the folks, whether they want to invest in roads or whether they want to invest in transit, whether they want to invest in rural transportation. None of that is on the table right now. Right. That we would normally be having this discussion at budget. This is where the dialogue happens about given all of these things that are true, how are we going to prioritize ourselves and put ourselves in the best position to get us where we need to be.
Okay. All right. Doug, hello.
Hello. Good morning. Just a question on the bike lanes. It seems to me that the conversation is mostly surrounded by the peninsula, Halifax and Dartmouth, I guess, in the city core. Am I right around that?
Yeah, more than not. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm just wondering, like, I've often heard the older councillors come on there before and often say that the roads, we have as many roads, kilometers in the city of HRM. To keep bringing up HRM, and that I've lost my train of thought there for a second. And I forget how many kilometers there are, but it's thousands of kilometers. Is it the intent of council to put protective bike lanes throughout all of HRM? Or are we just talking about the city of Halifax and the peninsula?
So you can actually look at the.
Well, I don't want to look down. That's why I called you there.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm pulling it up right now, so we can all look together.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. So it is. It's Halifax, Dartmouth. Yeah, it goes like Southdale, Penhorn. Like it's around on that side of Dartmouth. It does go to Spryfield and up St. Margaret's Bay Road.
It's where the density is, Doug.
Yeah.
Out to Lower Sackville as well, Billy?
Well,
can I say something here?
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Why would, like, I lived in Timberley. I got a place up in Terrence Bay now, and my daughter lives in Oakfield, and I see people riding the bikes all the time. And why is it safe for them to do that out there without a protected bike lane and not those in the city? It takes me, and don't tell me about density. You have a little backup on any one of those roads, and that you'll see kilometers and kilometers of cars backed up. So I don't buy that argument, And that's a lot of money just for putting it all on all the taxpayers for the sake of, as far as I'm concerned, just the city core.
Okay.
I'll let some hang up.
Okay. All right. Billy, you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Doug. Well, that's where the density is. So the density inside the core, that's why it's safer. And did you say Oakfield Park?
He hung up.
Oh, okay. Okay, he hung up. But I mean, that's where the cycling lanes are, where the density is. And as far as Lower Sackville, Todd, you asked me about Lower Sackville there. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of cycling infrastructure around out there yet. I'm hoping there will be. I'm hoping that we can get the multi-use pathways connected. So between Lucasville Greenway, Sackville, from Old Sackville Road down into the town and whatnot. So.
Okay, all right, let's go back to the phone. Jamie, you've got a question not related to bike lanes, I understand.
Well, we can fire the bike lanes in there at the end. Okay. Questions. Billy, what would it take to get a flashing green light for a left-hand turn towards the highway from Old Sackville Road, Beaver Bank exit during rush hour? That traffic builds up.
So are you talking...
Back.
Are you talking coming off the highway, Jamie? Like into...
Basically, say if you was leaving Sackville trying to get onto the 101.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like with the buses coming out of the terminal there and everybody trying to leave the mall. And sometimes traffic's backed up past Sobeys in there. And then the other way, you can't get up to turn onto the highway because that lane's blocked with a stupid tree in the middle of the road.
Yes. So, that intersection is a mess. It's quite tight through Downsview Mall and everything there. But
a flashing light to let that get that traffic out of there would help.
Yep. So that is actually a provincially owned road. So that's a controlled access highway off the 101 all the way up to the lights around Kent there. That is all owned by the province of Nova Scotia, including the intersection and all the signals.
Oh, joy, oh, bless.
Yeah, so I'm hoping, and I've inquired about signals at that intersection there, coming out of Downsview, Walker Road and stuff for the buses and stuff like that. And Public Works is not willing to put another set of lights there because to have a set of lights that close to another set of lights is not good. So
maybe a little bit of a roundabout.
Well, that would be ideal. I don't know right now. There hasn't been any plans in there from the province as far as I know. We are awaiting a Link Nova Scotia transportation report that's due, it was due 6 weeks ago. So I'm hoping that's going to address a lot of the infrastructure problems around our area.
Perfect. As far as the bike lanes, I drive a concrete mixer in the city.
Yep.
And you want to see how hard it is to try to get these vehicles around this city to try to build stuff that needs to be built. Bike lanes in the main arteries is just like having a heart blockage in your heart.
Yeah,
slows things down. Bike lanes need to be moved off to the side streets, send them down the side streets. There's hardly any traffic down the side streets.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's safer for cyclists to not be traveling with cars.
And you wouldn't need the barricades, the cost of those. You need a few signs that say bikes this way.
Yeah.
You're going down an empty street.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, for me, I like what they have done along Bears Road. So you got a shared pathway there. It's painted green, up off the traffic, completely separated from the vehicles. So.
These concrete dividers that they put in with these orange, green sticks and stuff like that, like trying to get these trucks around, you're going to make a 3-point turn in some intersections to try to get through.
Okay,
Right.
Jamie, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. The reality is there are just some places that's not realistic, right, Nancy?
I guess so. Yeah.
I mean, like,
And that's kind of the function of the debate on Tuesday is that like we need people to show their homework, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for our councillors on the hot seat. We'll be right back. All right, time's flying here with our councillors. By the way, we will be taking your calls. If you don't get a chance to chat with the councillors, stay on the line because we have an open hour following our councillors on the hot seat. It's Nancy Hatling and Billy Gillis here in studio. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Gary, hello.
Good morning, Todd and councillors.
Hi, Gary.
The bicycle lane. We travel. My wife and I travel the HRM, quite extensively. And over the years, I remember when the bicycle lanes got started, it was only supposed to be $100,000 on an annual basis that we do these bicycle lanes, and now it's ballooned to $100 million. And I don't think it's going to stop there. But to say that they don't cause congestion is not true. I mean, you just heard the fellow with the cement truck. I mean, when you go downtown now, it's so congested with narrow streets. The cyclists themselves are not causing it because that's not the main cause. It's the bicycle lanes themselves, and they started off as we got to have these for transportation to work, and people can't get to work. Well, they spent $2.2 million worth of bicycle lanes around the Sambro Loop. The only people that use them are the extreme cyclists from about the end of May until maybe the second week in October, and when it gets cold, you don't see them anymore. So, I've been in places like Florida where the streets are exceptionally wide, 6 lanes in some places, and they have bicycle lanes, no question. But even there, in the sunny state, not many cyclists. I don't think. My wife and I, we went and used some cycles down there for several years, and never saw anyone on those bicycle paths. I was surprised that there was no one on them, and people not even walking. Really, we were in Orlando, and to say that people will use the bicycle lanes, I think that's a fallacy. And the reports that I've read was that after 5 years, I think the lifespan of a cyclist is like about 5 years of usage. And then and when you look at the college students, that's about right, because when they graduate and they wind up with really good jobs, guaranteed that the first thing they buy is a car. So,
okay, Gary, do you have a question for one of the councillors in the interest of time?
Yeah. I just like to know why they were so intense, and I'm so glad to hear Andy Finlar say that he's not the mayor of cyclists, that he's the mayor of the city it's transit first. So I guess what I really want to say, Todd, is mostly a commentary, not a question, but to point out the fact that they took off the Sambro bus that was paying for itself, and they say it was too expensive, yet we're going to spend $100 million on less than 1% of the population that will only use bicycle lanes.
Okay, I want to give the councillors a chance to respond. Nancy, you go ahead, please.
Yeah, again, just to call out, this motion doesn't say we're going to be transit first. That's not what this motion is saying. This motion is simply just saying that it wants to reevaluate, projected bike lanes and see if there's an opportunity and see if we can do them better. It does not say that we're going to invest in transit instead. So I just thought I'd call that piece out.
Well, I'm just talking. I'm just commenting because that is what Andy Fillmore has commented on this morning on Todd Veinotte show.
Sure, and I appreciate. I think that we all feel that way, right? Like, how do we strike the right balance here? That is a really, really, really important discussion to have. But that's not what this motion represents.
Well, that's being boxed in then. Well, thank you very much for that information.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. Wayne, hello.
Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Well, I'm just having my cigar on the driveway watching the puppies, and I'm just putting them in the car to go down to a veterans meeting. But anyway, I have a question for the councillors.
Okay.
Councillors, do you really think the public of Halifax and the world, because we're seeing it all around the world, all you got to do is listen to this show and you hear it every day. Do you really think that the public is healthy enough today for everybody to run out and jump on a bicycle to go to work? And what I mean by that is everybody's stressed out about groceries. Everybody's stressed out about rent. Everybody's stressed out about the power. Everybody's stressed. They're all stressed out because everything's too expensive and they can't afford it. And if you listen to this show every day, you will hear people telling you that. And wasting this money on bicycle lanes, I'm pro-bicycle lane, and I don't even agree with them.
Right.
So I'll figure that out.
Right.
So here's the question. Do you really think the public is healthy enough today because of mental health, of all this stress they're under? They're all going to get up in the morning and take a bicycle to work? That's my question.
Yeah, Wayne. Thank you for the question. I want to be clear. I am in support of responsible bike lanes. Clogging up any kind of city streets, I am not in favor of. I can tell you one of my highest correspondence I get is complaints about congestion and traffic, and that we need to do something about it right now.
Okay, so listen, before we end the hour here.
Yep.
So how come when you're going up Yonge Street, all the straight lanes are behind the left hand, and people are trying to make left-hand turns? All you're doing is plugging the city up. Why don't put all the straight lanes behind the right-hand turn, so when the right-hand person turns, you can carry on?
Wayne, unfortunately, we're out of time. We don't really have time to get into that. I think that if I were to respond, I would say that people are stressed out. People have budgetary challenges. That would, to me, be a reason to have a bike and to bike to get healthier and save money. Would it not?
I totally agree, but it ain't going to happen because they're all stressed. They just want to get to work, try to relax before they start their day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I will say, too, just I don't know where you are, but we do have, and it's funny that it's happening the exact same day. The rural transit study is appearing at council the very same day. So we are talking about all the things. Not to use Mayor Fillmore's, vocabulary, but this is not a binary thing. This isn't, we're either going to get bike lanes or we're going to get something else. The municipality is operating on all fronts.
Okay, Wayne, get a boogie. Thanks for the call, pal. Take care. All right. Listen, for those of you who wanted to continue to talk with this, stay on hold because we've got an open hour, but our time with the councillors is up. Nancy Hatling, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right. Billy Gillis, thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. You got it. That's Councillors on the Hot Seat. Your calls, 902-405-6000 when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. In the last hour, we chatted with the Mayor of Halifax, HRM, Andy Fillmore, and had our councillors on as well, Nancy Hatling and Billy Gillis, and the big conversation today surrounding a motion which will be debated tomorrow, tabled by the Mayor, concerning traffic, or rather bike lanes and active transportation. In response to growing public concern over worsening traffic congestion and rapidly increasing bike lane infrastructure costs, the Mayor will introduce the motion at the council meeting, as mentioned, tomorrow, calling for a temporary pause and review of new bike lane design and construction contracts. We know that the cost has ballooned to almost $100 million, up from what was supposed to be around $25 million. And look, folks, let's be realistic. That number is going to do nothing but go up. And I think that it's time for a fulsome debate here. The staff report, or the staff design, which was originally completed, was based on COVID traffic numbers, and it seems to me to be outdated. And look, I get it that when you pause something like this, that it's going to cost more money down the road because costs are going to go up, and it's going to take money to have a redesign and for staff to come up with a new report if in fact this does go forward. But I think that when you're spending this kind of money, and I think public sentiment would indicate that it's probably a good idea to pause this and to have a rethink. But what are your thoughts, folks? I want to get your take on all of this, or whatever else you got in your mind. So, do you agree with the mayor? Is it time to press pause on bike lane construction? Or do you disagree? Is it not the time? Do we forge ahead and move forward and go with the mantra, build it and they will come? And do some members of council have the blinders on when it comes to active transportation and bike lanes? No matter what the cost, no matter what the opposition, just forge ahead and regardless. Do some members of council have the blinders on with this issue? 902-405-6000. I will add this, and then I'll go to the phones. When it comes to bikes in general, motorized bikes and scooters, folks, are they becoming a problem? Because if you've got a motorized bike, I mean, these I don't know what the top speeds or some of these electric bikes are, but they zip along really fast. And these scooters zip along pretty fast as well. And do we need to figure out how we're going to deal with that when it comes to enforcement and following the rules of the road? 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Ed. Hello, Ed.
Good morning, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good, thank you. What I'm about to talk about, I certainly don't have all the details on it, so if anyone wants to call up and contradict me or add to what I'm saying, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, Todd, I think you'd probably agree that companies like Emira, Sobeys, Home Depot, Real Atlantic Superstores are all large, rich, profitable companies whose CEOs, CFOs, boards of directors are all probably rich, well-off individuals, right?
Yep.
Okay, so my question is this. Why is the Nova Scotia government subsidizing a portion of these and other companies' hiring to around 50% of more of their wages, with probably tens of millions or maybe even to the hundreds of millions of our taxpayers' dollars? So that's my first question. And the second one is, are not the rich individuals at the top of these companies the main beneficiaries?
Yeah, and I would agree with. I don't know if I can answer the question, but I agree that it. But here's the counter argument. What they'll tell you is that this is modus operandi for jurisdictions around the world, and certainly in the Western world. So therefore, if you don't do it, then they'll take their investment elsewhere, regardless of how much money they're making. That is what they'll tell you, that government subsidies and government money is part of doing business when it comes to big business. That's my response, Ed.
Emira, Sobeys, Home Depot, Real Atlantic Superstores are going to move out of here anytime soon.
I agree, Ed, but that's what they would tell you, is that they need to do it because that's what other jurisdictions are doing. They have to. Corporate welfare, I guess, is what we would call it, right?
And I think this, in part at least, is the spin doctors at work, and to me, it mostly benefits the ultra-rich or the very, very rich among us.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Todd, you have a good morning.
Okay, thanks a lot. 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. You, my friend?
Not too bad.
Right.
I listened to the councillors this morning on that topic, and I also listened, of course, to Mayor Fillmore. Now, I just want to remind those councillors, I hope they're listening, and everybody else, that in the mayoral campaign and the councillors one, but particularly the mayoral one, there was two big issues. One was the active transportation, which was really focused on the need for more buses, transit, and what have you. So that was a real big item. So I think all that the mayor's doing is bringing that back on stream and saying, look, we have to look at how much money we're spending on bike lanes And when you go around the city, Halifax, Dartmouth, you'll see these concrete bunkers, I call them. They're everywhere, and they're mostly positioned for the bikes to be able to move up and down. Almond Street is really terrible now. They've even obstructed a business that's been there for 70 years, a little cafeteria, and the gentleman can't have delivery trucks move up to his business now because of a bike lane. And the signs are there for no parking anytime and what have you. And I think one of your councillors was looking into that. But I'm all in favor of the mayor's approach. I think it exemplifies to me, Todd, the disadvantage of our weak mayor system, where the mayor is elected by the general population and sets his agenda or her agenda when they run for mayor, and then they bring it forward, and council has, of course, in our system, the ability to argue it and make up their their votes according to their own constituencies. But he's taking the bull by the horns and saying the biggest issue is transit, and we need better transit to move people around. So I think he's on the right course, and I think the one councillor, I think, said he was leaning toward it, and the other one wasn't so sure, if I'm not correct.
Well, Billy Gillis was definitely for it, and Nancy, I would say, was on the fence at best, and I don't want to speak for her, but my feeling is that she's against the motion.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting debate, because this is another debate where the mayor practically has to step in the ring and try to defend himself and try to get some actions on the stuff that he wants to do, which platform he was elected on as mayor. Yeah. And he's bringing it forward, and it's very difficult for a mayor to do that. And that's the problem with the weak mayor system, I think. But I think, for example, where I live in Spryfield, as yourself, it takes you, my God, I mean, you can't even make a left turn in the city anymore without waiting 15, 20 minutes to make a left turn, let alone because they've closed off streets with bicycle lanes and other things like that. But we got to get things moving, and there are more cars. Everybody knows that. But there aren't enough buses. And if we can move people around, particularly seniors like myself, maybe you're not always going to be able to drive. If you can pay for a taxi, good luck to you. But it'd be nice to be able to jump on a bus and get from A to B within 20 minutes or 15. So I think the mayor's headed in the right direction. And I'll be looking at council to see where their heads are, because sometimes they start looking at their constituencies, Todd, and they forget about the general population, and that's my opinion.
Okay, Jim, thanks for the call, pal.
Take care.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Lewis, hello. Hi, Lewis. Go ahead. Lewis, are you there? Okay, I'll put Lewis on hold. 902-405-6000. Hi, Chris.
Good morning, Todd. Quick comment. I called to talk about bike lanes, but I've been on hold for that. But Ed's comment about the government money thrown into businesses, I mean, he is right, I think, in that these businesses that he mentioned, they're not going to leave here. I mean, the Superstore's not going to close down unless Sobeys come in and take over their footprint. That's not going to happen. But I think in where you were coming from is right to a certain degree as well. But it's mainly, I think, new businesses coming in will throw out the plan to governments on different levels and say, okay, who's going to give us the money? Because they can set up anywhere they want pretty much if they don't have infrastructure already.
That's right.
So they're going to say, oh, New Brunswick's going to pay me $10 million to set up there. Halifax, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
That's kind of where it goes.
Corporate welfare is what what it is, right? You know that as well as I do.
And I don't believe in it, but I mean, I know sometimes there's some benefits there, but really when you filter it all through, what are the benefits at the end of the day? I mean, really, it's hard to look at that. But staff, I'm inclined to agree with you on the split in pro and con on the mayor's proposal this morning between Billy and Nancy. I feel that Nancy is going to vote against it. I hope she doesn't, but I'm in favor of the mayor's proposal 100%. But we got to remember, Nancy doesn't live on the peninsula, does she?
No, she doesn't. She lives out in the Prospect area.
That's right. She doesn't have to go from where you live in Spryfield to where you work in town twice a day, 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have to go for shopping and things like I do, from the south end to the north end to the west end to wherever I have to go either. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have to drive over the horrible roads in the peninsula like we do. And sure, she comes into council once a week on Tuesdays or whatever, and maybe not even that some days, I don't know. But so she doesn't have the same perspective that the rest of us would have. But they're looking at staff with another report probably, and I brought this up before, and I think a lot of other people agree with it. Staff, I think council they give staff too much power, and they depend too heavily on staff. And when you do that, you have to look and consider the fact that does staff have an agenda of their own? Because if you're working on something, no matter how impartial you try and be, your own personal feelings, Todd, and I think you'll agree with me, your own personal feelings to some degree will affect your decision. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's human nature.
That's right. So I think they kind of depend on staff too much for a lot of things, not just this. But the bike lanes, when you put bike lanes, bus lanes, whatever, on a main artery, of course you're going to restrict and constrict the traffic flow. That goes without saying. They should have known this from the get-go it was going to happen. It's not only that, it's these no right turn on reds that they put in everywhere in town. They just changed another one recently on Oxford and Jubilee. It used to be freewheeling. You know, you make your right on the red as long as you came to a complete stop beforehand and so on. But then they put up a no right turn on red sign, except it was only for Mondays and Fridays, like 8 till 6 or something like that. Well, now that part's gone. It's no right turn on red anytime at that intersection. So that's going to constrict things even more. And to say, well, let's put the bike lanes on the side streets. Well, in my experience, cyclists find, like water, the path of least resistance. Cyclists wheel through town. They go up and down the side streets. They're going to make their route once especially if they have a dedicated route back and forth to work all the time or a schedule, they're going to make their route on the side streets anyway. So don't think about putting bike lanes on side streets. You're going to spend more money there. You're going to lose parking on those streets and so on, which is an irritation and an aggravation to everybody. And I think I heard a comment earlier that Halifax was the third most popular cycle use city or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you can look on the internet, and it's hard to find things where it's easy to find what you're looking for. But I just did a quick little search, and Montreal, Victoria, Vancouver, Kelowna, Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, Saskatoon, and a whole bunch more come up way ahead of Halifax. So where's this statistic that Halifax is number 3? I find that the people that are pro-bicycle are cherry-picking, and somebody might accuse me of cherry-picking what I just said, and feel free if you want. It's there for the reading. But I think they'll cherry-pick things to say that, hey, there's a lot of use on this. Like the statistic the other week, 12 or 12.5% of people use the active transportation.
Okay, well, I'll just read the quote from David Truman, chairman of the coalition, which is obviously a strong proponent of this, in the Herald this morning. Says, a little-known fact is that Halifax is the second highest rate of active transportation of all cities in Canada. And I agree that the story, whoever did the interview didn't say, well, where'd you get that data? Because the story does not cite that data, and I think it should be. If you're going to say something like that, you need to be able to back it up with data.
Yeah, but Todd, they're throwing in this 12% or something I heard last week about this active transportation. They're including people who walk to work, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking bicycle lanes and what they cause. The people walking to work are not constricting traffic, and they've always been people walking to work. They walk on the sidewalks, for God's sake. We've got less than 2%. I think it's around 1 or 1.25% of people in HRM that actually use a bike.
Right. Okay, Chris. Okay, bud, I got a boogie. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Todd, for the time.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
All right, 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. What are your thoughts on this? Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, back to your calls, 902-405-6000. Folks, give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. Look, if some of you listening out there like the idea of, or don't like the idea of this motion from the mayor, which it would press pause on bike lane and active transportation construction, which council will debate tomorrow, then let us know. But if you do, same thing, 902-405-6000. Give us a call. Want to hear from you. Want to get as much balanced conversation as we can here, folks. That's the goal. Gloria, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, you?
I tried to get on when the council was on, but I had to leave to go get my shingles shot.
Okay, well, that's good you get that taken care of anyway.
So I'm all shot up now.
That's great.
Anyway, in my opinion, Todd, this active transportation plan has been a failure. It has failed in so many ways, and I've spoken about it before. First of all, accessibility. It has taken away accessibility to people in wheelchairs and people who need to be able to get to places easily. It has closed off businesses. It has, with these, there are four, no less than four on Wise Road now, no right-hand turns, impeding traffic, and just think of the extra emission when the cars are sitting there parked, waiting to, or revving, waiting to make a turn.
Yeah.
Just think of all that. And this cost is so out of control. And it's okay for the councillor to say, that doesn't mean that money will be spent on roads. Well, it very well could be spent on roads. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be budget time to talk about the condition of the roads. I drove in from Colby on Portland Street. It is unbelievable. It is nothing but holes. Mm-hmm. And we want to spend $90 million on bikes.
And Gloria, of course, that number, sorry to interrupt you, but you know that number is going to be 100 and God knows how much million when all is said and done.
We know.
Yeah.
And they say they're listening, but are they hearing? If they were listening and hearing, they would know that the vast majority of the residents in HRM do not like this bike lane plan. It has not worked well. They put these concrete barriers out, which slowed up things. They've done everything, in my opinion, the wrong way. So I'm supporting the mayor 100%, and I'm so happy that we finally have a mayor who will step up and make a tough decision. And it won't be easy tomorrow. I know all the naysayers, Austin and Clary and Morris, and, we need the bike lanes because the less than 1% or a little over 1% of the people will be hard done by if we don't do it. While the taxpayers who have to pay the 90 or 100 million will be hard done by. Many who are having a tough time now. So, councillors, shake your heads, get your act together, and support the mayor.
Okay, Gloria, appreciate the call. Take care. All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Look, what are your thoughts on this, folks? Again, if you're listening out there and you don't support this motion, and you want to see that the city moves ahead with tenders and active transportation and build this network regardless of the price, then let us know. Again, reading a story in the Chronicle Herald this morning, David Truman, chairman of a coalition that is pro-bike, pro-active transportation, claims, he says, a quote, "A little-known fact is that Halifax has the second highest rate of active transportation of all the cities in Canada. Why aren't we building upon that rather than tearing it down?" And again, I'm not sure where he gets that information, and the story doesn't cite that. I would love to know where he got that information. But what are your thoughts on this, folks? Give us a call, regardless of what side you fall down on this. Give us a buzz or whatever else you got in your mind. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. Taking your calls, 902-405-6000. We've got open lines for you folks. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. Here's a quick email from Dave, then back to the phones. Dave says, it's fantastic to once again see Andy Fillmore's willingness to have difficult conversations in the biggest interest of Haligonians. The skyrocketing costs of bike lanes should be concerning to all councillors, not just the mayor. Mayor Fillmore's common sense approach to delivering core services has only galvanized my support for him, a sentiment which is gaining much momentum in the community. Bravo, Mayor Fillmore. That from Dave in Halifax. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Of course, we're talking about this motion, which the mayor will table tomorrow, which council will debate, calling for a pause on construction, a temporary pause, while a review is done on new bike lane design and construction contracts with costs skyrocketing. Really, do you want to talk about skyrocketing, $20 to $25 million up to $100 million, and that will do nothing but go up for sure. And also, a lot of the design work was done based on, according to the mayor this morning, on traffic patterns during the pandemic. So he feels as though it's time to, from a planning perspective, to have a relook, a retool, and also assess the costs. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Do you think that this is a good idea, or should we forge ahead, or maybe you got something else in your mind? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Lewis, hello. Hi, Lewis.
Todd. Yeah, great day. What?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all.
Todd, here's my thoughts. I'd like to see them do away with bike lanes totally. I don't think they're useful. I don't think they serve any purpose. And as a lot of people have said, it supports 1% of the population. I think it's just a useless, foolish waste of money. It ties up traffic. It makes just a look at the Spring Garden Road. Look at South Park Street. The intersection of South Park and Sackville Street. It's just nuts. A drunk wouldn't have even come up with those ideas. So that's my dollar's worth.
Well, Lewis, you say that they serve no purpose, but if you're a biker, if you're a bicyclist rather, then you like it, right? I think that would go without saying. What about the argument that if you build it, they will come and people will use them if it's properly built and contiguous and connected? You don't agree with that, or what?
No, don't agree with that at all. I drove a bicycle as a kid in Halifax. I lived there all my life. I'm still from around the area. From the age of, say, 7 years old to my mid-teens. I had no problem riding a bicycle all over Halifax. I didn't need a bike lane to tell me where to drive. I was smart enough to stay close to the curb and drive. Why would you build great big cement blocks 3 feet wide so a cyclist can use it? It's just stupid, totally stupid. That's my...
Okay, Lewis. Okay, all right. Take care. Thank you. 902-405-6000. Look, folks, some of you out there are again, will support the bike lane construction, use them, and would use. I'm of the belief that, look, when I was younger, when I was in my 40s and I was living in St. John, I bought a bike and I decided to use the bike and there were no bike lanes, virtually none in the city at that time. And I stopped biking because it was so dangerous. Because, if you're going to bike along with traffic, that you are taking your life in your hands, folks. It is very, very dangerous. Now, if in fact the bike lanes were available at that time in St. John, and I think they've built some since, but certainly not a network that would be contiguous, I would have definitely kept biking, and that would have been a decision maker for me. So I do believe that if bike lanes were there and were contiguous and connected, that more people would use them. Now the question is how many more people would use it, and is it worth the investment? That's the question. But I do believe that if you had bike lanes, more people would use them. I do believe that because that would have been my experience. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Todd, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. I'm calling for two reasons. One, I'd like to thank everybody for helping us fight these forest fires out in Manitoba.
Okay.
The military, I'd like to thank everybody. The second thing is, quickly, that you mentioned before about that Bedford Highway. Now, when I lived out in Rockingham in the 60s, every time it rained, that Bedford Highway was backed up before they improved it from Millville right up to the Fairview overpass. And, I know I listen to the show regularly, and that city's changed. I haven't been out there in almost 14 years, 11 years since I've been out there, and I watch news online, and that city's changed, but I just wanted to call and, like I say, I'd like to thank everybody, military, everybody's been coming to help us for his forest fires. YM is a lot cooler. We had rain yesterday, and starting is a lot cooler today than it's been, but I just want to thank everybody, and thank you and Vanessa both.
Okay, pal, so you're out of the line of fire right now, hopefully?
I'll make this quick. I know you got a lot of calls, but as far as I am at, I live in a municipality called Robin, and that's the Manitoba and Saskatchewan border. And where I am, there's no fire, but it's all up farther north, Todd.
Okay, pal. Well, stay safe. Thanks for the call, bud.
Thank you, brother.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Steven's giving us a call. Hello, Steven. Hey, Steven, are you there?
Happy Monday, Todd.
Yeah, happy Monday indeed. What's going on, pal?
Yep.
What's on your mind?
Oh, one hell of a way to spend 1/5 of your one way to spend 1/5 of your life, eh? Mondays.
Yeah. I think it's more like 1/7, isn't it?
Bike lanes, yeah. Well, the weekend doesn't count, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So you were saying, Stephen?
I go with it. I agree with it. It's 1/7, but I think the weekend doesn't count because you're off doing errands and doing fun stuff that you really enjoy, sort of thing. Bike lanes, I agree with you. They're good. If anyone disagrees with them, go to Montreal. They've got them everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of users in Montreal.
No right-hand turns. Montreal, tons of bike lanes.
Yeah.
Tons of protected bike lanes. And tons of advanced lights to allow bikes to go through first before cars go through. Mm-hmm. They've done it right in downtown Montreal. The no right-hand turns on red, I actually like it. San Antonio, Texas, a little city you probably heard of. It's got 1.53 million people in it. It's 500,000 people more than the entire province of Nova Scotia. Guess what you cannot do on a red light? Turn right.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we need to turn right on a red light? Because people roll up to a red light, and you know what they're doing? They're looking left to see how fast they can get around that corner, and they're not stopping. So no right-hand turns on red light. Huge fan of that. And my last thing is, and I was kind of hoping to get on the call with Nancy, HRM seems to be, they're fixing stuff, but they seem to be moving at a glacial pace, fixing stuff. Now, I don't know if it's they don't have enough people, they don't know if it's scheduling. Like where I live to, I was here in Westwood, and to Buddy there with the wildfires. You know, I can only personally identify him with him, and that's a traumatic experience. But you know, we've got a post office box with a cover over the top of it and a light standard, and it got knocked down by a plow. But HRM is fighting with Canada Post on who's responsible for standing it back up. I've had 3 tickets open on it. They keep closing them, saying they're not responsible. Well, I took a photo of the electrical box that's sitting on the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Halifax Electric.
Yeah.
So I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure at HRM. Like they seem to move at a glacial post in some respects.
Oh, we lost Stephen. Sorry, Stephen. I apologize. I'm not sure what happened. 902-405-6000. Tom, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. Todd, I'm a first-time caller, but I listen to the show quite a bit.
Great.
I just want to comment on, number one, supporting Andy Filmer. Finally, someone with some sense on city council. I want to comment on Gloria McCluskey's, sorry, I shouldn't say her last name, I guess. But anyway,
that's fine. Of course you say her last name.
I certainly support everything that she said. I think this council has to give their head a shake. The same, I mean, I live on Hollis Street in downtown Halifax. We've got a concrete bike lane the entire length of Halifax. I do want to congratulate the coalition yesterday because I finally, when I was walking my dog, saw someone riding a bike down Hollis Street. First time in days and weeks. I think that the city has overbuilt these bike lanes. They've spent money irresponsibly. As a matter of fact, I'm a huge critic of the last 10 years of this council, the old council, and many of those councillors got reelected. The incompetence of this city council to understand what's going on in this city. We've exploded growth, which is fine, but no infrastructure, no work done on the streets. The holes, and I agree totally with Gloria, the holes in the city, in the streets of the city of Halifax are an absolute abomination. This council, the last fellow said this council moves way too slow. I don't think this council does anything. They rely on staff to do everything, to make every decision. And so anyway, I just wanted to phone in and certainly support Mayor Fillmore, finally, a politician in Halifax with some nerve and some sense to move this city forward. So that's my thought, Todd.
Tom, what are your thoughts on the fact that likely, if I were to put money down, that this motion won't pass? What are your thoughts on that?
I hope that this motion passes because, number one, I think that what he's not saying, I don't think Mayor Fillmore is saying take out all the bike lanes. I think he's saying take a pause. Let's go back and do some work. I've heard a comment from the councillors on your hot seat a few months ago that talked about thousands of bikers every day using these bike lanes. It's impossible. I don't know what report that they're citing. I drive around the city there's certainly not thousands of people a day using bike lanes in the city of Halifax. The other thing, Todd, is that it is when you think about the city of Halifax, number one, it may not be a mountain, but it's almost a mountain. And if you wanted to use bike lanes, you've got 4 months out of 12. There's nobody using bike lanes during the late fall, the winter, and the early spring. It's just, number one, it's not that they don't want to use them. It's just almost impossible. So your question, do I think that the motion will pass? I hope that this council finally gives their head a shake and said, you know what, Mayor Fillmore, you're saying, let's take a pause, let's rethink, let's reanalyze. And I don't think anybody of any sound mind, of any sense, could say that would be a bad idea.
Okay, Tom, appreciate the call, pal. Call again.
Okay, thanks.
All right, take care, 902-405-6000. Earlier I mentioned the fact that I biked when I was living in St. John for a period of time and biked to work, but stopped because there were no bike lanes, and I found it was just too dangerous to cycle with traffic in that situation. And I said that if bike lanes were built, I probably would have kept cycling. And an email from Lee says, you would have used bike lanes in the rain, in the winter. How long would you realistically use them? Half the year? The rest of the time, they're a white elephant. Why do we not? We do not have the climate, and specifically Halifax is very hilly, and I agree with that, Lee. I probably would not have on rainy days or inclement weather, or certainly in the winter, I would not have driven a bike. So that's true. That's a good point. And Halifax is hilly, and that is a factor for sure. These are all good points, folks. It's all part of the conversation. It's part of the discussion, and we want to have you included in that discussion. So give us a call, 902-405-6000. We've got some open lines for you. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. David's giving us a call. Hello, David.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
I am glad that Andy's taking a look at the bus lanes because it seems, or the not bus lanes, but the bike lanes.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. Now, whether you're in favor or you're not in favor of buses or people, or keep saying buses, bikes, they're here to stay. I mean, these new bikes now, electrical bikes, motorized bikes, you know, they're all over the place, and I think they are here to stay, so they do need space to drive them and a safe spot. Let's hope that some of these decisions that these councils seems to make all the time is like, it's like the electric bus, for instance. They decide they're going to buy, instead of trying a couple electric buses, they buy a fleet of them. So I think they need to back off, take a look at what's going on, go from there. Okay. Save money. It kind of, I'll give you another little quick thing that kind of discourages me. I see all these speed humps, which I understand they're necessary, but there's a speed hump, they go out and they put it up, but 20 feet up the road, there's a great big pothole that maybe somebody hasn't come out and surveyed it to tell them that it's really a pothole. They don't put no asphalt in there. They move on and put a couple more humps in somewhere else.
Yeah.
Would you not think if they were right there putting a speed hump in, they'd drive a little bit of asphalt in that hole over there, fellas? It's not rocket science. You don't have to have an engineer in to tell you it's a pothole, do you?
Yeah, there you go.
you see a bunch of hubcaps laying all around the area, it's probably a good indication.
Yeah, well, common sense is not all that common, unfortunately, David, right?
Right on. Anyway, I'll let you go.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks for
Thanks, pal. Okay, 902-405-6000. Wayne. Hello, Wayne.
Hi.
Hi there. Go ahead.
I bike all the time. I agree with the bike lanes. If there wasn't no bike lanes, I would be stuck in traffic, and I would slow traffic down. You wanted to follow the rules, and I follow the rules of the road.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
And traffic was slowed down in front of them.
Yeah.
Like, I bike from Dartmouth to Sackville every day, and there's no bike lanes going to Sackville.
It's dangerous, Wayne, isn't it? Don't you think that's very dangerous? I think biking among traffic is dangerous.
It is dangerous, so there should be bike lanes. Like, I go from Dartmouth to Sackville, and I'm biking up the Magazine Hill.
Yeah. Yeah, you're taking your life in your own hands doing that, Wayne.
I am, but, I have no choice because, it's either that or I live out in a tent or I have no car. I can't afford a car.
Yeah.
So biking is the only way I get to go to the work.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so you think forge ahead with this with the bike lanes.
They built that new, you think about it, they built that new highway from Dartmouth from Bedford to Sackville and into Dartmouth, and they didn't even put a bike lane in it. And the state spent all this money doing this, and yet they're worried about cars, but 99% of the Halifax and Dartmouth area is allowed to go bike or scooter or whatever. But, not everybody can afford a car to go everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, Wayne, thanks for the call, bud. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Chris, hello.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. I just want to comment on the bicycle lanes there. I don't know anybody who's 60 years old who drives from Fall River into the Halifax or Dartmouth area to work every morning on a bicycle and come home with inclement weather and everything else. Plus, there's no insurance on bicycles, no safety instructions on them. You got to have insurance on vehicles, insurance on, or you have to have a safety inspection on your vehicle, and you have to keep it up and that. But there's no enforcement for the bicycles. They don't have any safety inspections. There's no insurance on them. If a guy runs into your car with a bike, the guy in the car is automatically at fault all the time. They're always blaming, it's the guy driving. And it's not always the guy driving. And I see bicycles going through red lights and everything all the time. Who's enforcing them? Who's enforcing them to see if they have a helmet and that on? Nobody's doing that. And putting $94 million into putting bicycle lanes in, totally ridiculous. Absolutely ludicrous. This council has to be changed, and people got to get in their head together. No one who's 60 years old, who works, drives a bicycle, who lives in the rural county to get to work. It's ridiculous to think that. Thanks for your time.
Okay, Chris. All right, take care. Look, in fairness, I hear you, Chris, and everybody's own experience always outweighs other people's. I shouldn't say always, but generally that's the way it is. But if you're council and you're looking at it, in fairness, you're not thinking of the 60-year-old. You're thinking of the younger people who you want to live here and stay here, and that's just and that's why Andy Fillmore, I think, in this motion is that you need to have transit and other things in concert, in coordination with the bike lane development and active transportation, because to his point, and Jim said this earlier, who still drives but is a senior, and at some point will probably need transit. So Mayor Fillmore's part of this motion is let's look at all aspects of getting around, including building out transit. Because, and that's a valid point in my humble opinion. All right, one more caller on this. Wayne, go ahead quickly if you can, please.
Yeah, I'm 60 years old. I just called a little while ago, and I just heard a guy say he's complaining about people driving back and forth on Fall River. Like, who can afford a car? He must have a car because he doesn't have a bicycle. Because I'm healthier by doing it.
Yeah, but Wayne, wouldn't transit make more sense to build out transit and have a good transit system first?
It would, but you know what? I'm on a fixed budget. I can live in a tent and take the Metro Transit, but you know what? I can't afford rent and do it all at the same time. Like, I'm costing in Fisher. I live in an apartment. I bike to work every day. It's how I can afford to live in an apartment. If not, I cannot afford to live in an apartment. I would live in a tent. So, you know, it's one or the other.
Okay, Wayne, appreciate the call. Take care. All right, well, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with this motion tomorrow and if it passes or not, and we will certainly follow up and continue to talk about this, I'm sure, as the week goes along. The book is called Anatomy of a Cover-Up, The Truth... the truth about the RCMP and the Nova Scotia Massacres. Paul Palango is the author. Paul Palango joins me in studio when we come back. All right, the book is called Anatomy of a Cover-Up, The Truth About the RCMP and the Nova Scotia Massacres. Its author is the one and only Paul Palango, who's a veteran journalist, former Globe and Mail national editor. Other books include 22 Murders. And I could go on and on and on with the pedigree of Mr. Palango, but I think that instead of doing that, we'll have a chat. Paul, it's a real privilege to have you in studio, my friend. Thank you so much.
Hey, I haven't been here since the days of Andrew Crystal.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, I think you had a book launch yesterday. I apologize for not attending.
No problem. It was we were at the old Triangle Ale House, and it was packed. The bookseller from the bookseller store on Spring Garden Road sold out his supply of books before the event even started. Mm-hmm. People were buying 4 and 5 and 6 at a time. Mm-hmm. And we had a good event. Yvonne Colbert was there.
Yeah, the wife of Rick, of course.
And I sort of stunned her because the book is partly dedicated in memory of Rick Howe.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And she was sort of opened the book up, and then I had her speak. Yeah. And
well, I inherited you from Rick.
Yep.
Really, that's kind of how it happened. My opinion was this. If Rick Howe believes in this guy, I believe in this guy. Because that is the integrity of a journalist that Rick was, and you are, in my opinion.
Rick was very instrumental in pushing this story forward and defeating the official narrative.
Yeah.
The official narrative being that in the Portapique massacres, there was a domestic violence situation that got out of hand. The Mounties were caught flat-footed. All ended well at the end of the day, even though 22 people died. And I always thought there's something else going on here. And bit by bit, with the help of Rick, the incredible help of Rick, we were able to uncover it bit by bit, because it was on Rick's show where I asked people about Gabriel Wortman getting money from Brinks, and someone responded and gave me the videotape of him getting the money from Brinks, $475,000, and that led down a whole other road.
Sure. You talk extensively in the book about the media and what you describe as the alternative media and the nighttime podcasts, of course. Talk a little bit about the media landscape, if you will.
Well, there's a real crisis, as everyone knows, in media. We have no local media virtually anymore, and the politicization of the media, taking on this cause, that cause, whatever, and they've become handmaidens to power, to the official sources, the police, government, whatever. So they only accept as stories whatever is official. Mm-hmm. And it was quite clear that they couldn't see that they were being snowed in this story. And why did it take me 5 years? I've been at this for 5 years and a couple of months. Yeah. Why? Why did it take that long for me to get to the point I'm at now? Because there was a thick fog over everything. Everything was turned upside down. And me and the citizen investigators like Chad Jones and Ryan Potter and others, we had to go.
Andrew
Douglas from Frank Magazine, who was
a big shout out here.
Andrew Douglas was sort of the last speaker yesterday at the book launch and had everyone in stitches, but he was absolutely instrumental because he took over the role in Frank Magazine that the conventional media should have been doing.
Yeah, that's
publishing
true.
Original stories.
Yeah, and we ended up responding like the 911 recordings. That was an example where people didn't believe it until lo and behold it was true.
And when we got the 911 tapes, I think we talked about this back then. we had a meeting, and there was Chad Jones and Andrew, me and Jordan Bonaparte when he was part of it. And we looked at it and said, the 911 tapes from the children, we shouldn't publish that. And then we debated it and saying, well, we have no choice to publish it because the young Blair boy who was on the phone with the 911 operator was being perfectly lucid in the most traumatic sort of situation. His parents had just been murdered in front of him, and he's explaining what happened. He's explaining it to their neighbor, Gabriel. He's dressed as a policeman. He has a police car, and the 911 operator is more concerned about the fire.
Yeah.
And if we'd done that with a transcript, the RCMP and government officials would say, well, you don't have the whole story. Mm-hmm. You're missing it. You're missing the context. You're missing that.
Yeah.
And we published the tapes. And as I said at the time to Jordan and Andrew and stuff, I said, I'll take the heat for it because we're going to get a lot of heat because people are going to get all emotional about it. And they're not paying it. They won't be paying attention to what the story is really saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, lots and lots to talk about, and I don't want to make this about me for sure, but you gave the show a nice shout out, and I'll read a bit of it. You said the legacy and alternative media have largely accepted the official narrative about the massacres, despite the obvious gaping holes in the story. An important contributor to getting the whole story out and helping to change public opinion has been Halifax talk show host Todd Veinotte. He picked up where the late Rick Howe left off and is willing to be critical of the RCMP, which is tough but necessary. Sell to many of those in his audience who don't want to hear that message, and I thank you for that. That was,
you're welcome.
I was humbled by that.
You did what you did, and I appreciate that you had me on because it was hard to get the message out and to connect with people and to show them I wasn't a conspiracy theorist.
No.
I'm a fact. In fact, I put on my T-shirt last night after Andrew Douglas spoke, and he was making some jokes. He thought that Frank magazine should have been on the cover of the book, and I put on my T-shirt that said, "I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I can prove it." And there's a little tinfoil hat and Frank magazine logo on the bottom.
Wow!
Of it.
Wow! Well done. Yeah, it's just, you know this story so well. the amount of work that you went into this is not a short read. This is a long read, and the details are massive. How does your brain work? How do you contextualize this and put it in a way that's cogent and is readable? What's your process?
Well, in this book, as in 22 Murders, I lay a foundation for the story. So the first quarter to third of the book, some people may find is sort of dull or not interesting or fascinating, depending on their point of view, but provide a foundation in showing how a cover-up works in Canada historically. Mm-hmm. And one of the cover-ups that I've always written about from 2008 on, we talked extensively about it on the Andrew Crystal show here for 2 hours back in 2008 about the Meher Arar case and how that was a cover-up. But I discovered it retrospectively. This one I could see coming, so I covered it in real time. And the point of 22 Murders, the original book, was to put as many names and situations on the record to force any inquiry to have to deal with them all. Mm-hmm. They would have to generate paper, and I knew they were going to hide a lot of the paper, but that didn't matter because they would have to produce it at some point. Mm-hmm. And because they feared what we demonstrated, Andrew and I and Chad and Ryan and others demonstrated that we could get inside the walls of the RCMP, the MCC, the Department of Justice, and get real stories out. Mm-hmm. So that would make them all paranoid about what we could see and not see. So they had to have everything. Mm-hmm. But they just mixed it all up and they hid it, often in plain sight. Mm. And then my process was to go through it and find it. There was over probably 3 million words, not easily searchable, and we all spent time going through it and made discoveries, as you see, right up to the end of the story.
Mm. Yeah, the MCC is really kind of, I don't want to say the kingpin of this book, but it's integral part of the story. Would you agree with that, obviously, right? The MCC and the cover-up as you describe it?
Yeah, what you see people were confounded by the MCC. Like, what is it doing? Why is it so dull? Why is it so mixed up? Why is it so jumbled? Well, there was obviously, as you look at this, a cynical, coordinated effort by the RCMP, the MCC, the federal government, the provincial government, and the departments of justice to manipulate the story and create a narrative that was somewhat true, but not fully true. And then what it became, you asked about my process. Well, the process then becomes, since they're making it difficult to get evidence, the one way to prove it is to prove the negative proof. And the negative proof is you take their stories and show they're false. And then when you show their stories are false, that means there's another truth. And you can infer from the facts that they're there what the other truth is. We're still waiting for the other truth to come out, but there's a lot of facts in there that show that their story was not true.
Okay, I want to get into more of this, but we need a break. We'll be right back with Paul Palango. All right, chatting with Paul Palango. Of course, the book is called Anatomy of a Cover-Up, The Truth About the RCMP and the Nova Scotia Massacres. And Paul, listen, you have a lot of nerve, my friend. I got to tell you, you got some guts. You got some courage, and I say that respectfully.
Oh, thank you.
You know, and it, at some point, it must be a challenge to do the work that you do and to stick your neck out the way that you do. What are your any thoughts on that, or do you feel that that's not accurate?
No, I've sort of back in the 90s. I sort of came to a decision about how my life was going to go. And I was going to get involved in telling the stories I wanted to tell, not the stories somebody else wanted me to tell. And I've never told this to anyone before, but I took $1 million life insurance policy out of my life so that my wife and kids would be taken care of.
Wow.
And then I just said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I'll take on whoever. And that's basically the trajectory of what I do.
Wow, that's very interesting. What about, do you consult a lawyer with this stuff, or do you...
I've been, in the early days, I was involved in, probably by the 90s, 18 major lawsuits, multi-million-dollar lawsuits, corporately or personally. I won them all. I know a lot about libel law. I know how to write it. I mean, when I wrote 22 Murders, the Random House said, okay, we've set aside a week for the book to be lawyered, and it was done in a day and a half.
Is that right?
And they said, it was so fast. They said, yeah, there was one correction from the lawyer, because I know how to write the story. I know what I can articulate and how to articulate.
What would you say are the most confrontational or the most... If you were to say of this, what do you think would be the most, I guess, salacious details of this book?
Well, there's two things. There's probably dozens of things in the book, but two that stand out. When I talked about the negative proof, the RCMP story from the beginning was that Gabriel Wortman killed 13 people in Portapique, escaped through a road in the blueberry field they didn't know about. And I prove extensively that didn't happen. There's all kinds of different things that are there. But the most important was a fellow named Dean Dillman, who worked for the Department of Natural Resources. He said he was there at 10:38. They said Wortman escaped at 10:45, but Dillman was sitting at the top of the Blueberry Field Road. He gave a couple of interviews to the RCMP, eventually explaining that. But he was not specific about the time. And the times were recorded on his phone because he says, I called my mother, I did this, I tried to call someone else, I tried to call Leon Jodry. None of that was ever followed up. And I wrote the book. When I wrote that story, I concluded by the time I got to Dean Dillman that Wortman hadn't gone through the blueberry field. And then I finally got Dillman's phone records through his mother, Autumn Doucette. And what had happened was Dillman had responded to the original story, gone to the RCMP, and said, I was there too, trying to be helpful, and eliminated them working on investigating him. And Dillman turned out, he said, his records show he was there at 10:38. He called Leon Jodrey at 10:42, like he said he did. Wortman couldn't have gone through there because the other problem the RCMP hadn't accounted for was Corey Ellison had not been killed till 10:40:12. So Dillman was already there when Corey Ellison was killed. So that suggested if the RCMP story is not true about him leaving, what's the truth? And that truth appears to be Clinton Ellison, Corey Ellison's brother, said at one point, a number of points, I think the Mounties killed my brother. I think the evidence strongly suggests that's the case, that he was accidentally shot in a confrontation. And a couple of the proofs of this, the first press conference after the massacres, that awful press conference, Chief Superintendent Chris Leathers said, we're making 3 referrals to CERT, the Serious Incident Response Team. One involving the shooting of Wortman at the Enfield Big Stop, one involving the shoot-up at the Onslow Belmont Fire Hall, and the third, an exchange of gunfire between the gunman and the RCMP. Then that third one disappeared, never to be seen again. And later on, Leathers said, and others said, every word Leathers said there was approved in advance.
Right.
That it was the facts. It wasn't a slip of the tongue.
That's on the record that there were 3
That's
shooters.
on the record.
Right. And
then it disappeared.
Never again did it emerge?
No, it disappeared.
Wow.
And Lisa Banfield also said in one of her earlier statements that was not redacted, Lisa Banfield being Gabriel Wortman's common-law wife, Lisa Banfield says words to this effect. I was hiding in the woods and I heard a man say, how's it going, boys? Bang, 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 bang. I think that's her. She was in that vicinity of that because it was near Wortman's warehouse where Corey Ellison was shot. And one last point on this. In the Mass Casualty Commission, they did everything they could to make that RCMP story work, including on a map moving Ellison's body from the west side of Orchard Beach Drive to the east side of Orchard Beach Drive to suggest that Wortman pulled up there, then drove down to the Blueberry Field. That's not where the story didn't work if they had him on the other side of the road.
Yeah. And the MCC, the scope of the MCC in general, I mean, we could talk all day about that, right?
Well, there was only 76 days of hearings and spread out over 6-8 months, and only about 30 of those were people testifying, and then the lawyers could not cross-examine anyone they couldn't ask a question that wasn't approved of by the MCC. What kind of fact-finding is that?
Yeah. Well, Paul, listen, it's just a fascinating book. We're just about out of time. How do people get the book, first of all?
It's available everywhere. It's an audio version. I've done the audio version. And it's too bad we couldn't talk longer because I'd like to talk about Heidi Stevenson, the Heidi Stevenson case.
Yeah.
Give me a minute. They said 2 years after the shootings, the RCMP made the case that Heidi Stevenson got out of her car and got in a gunfight with Wortman. Every piece of evidence, including a letter from the then interim director of CERT, Pat Curran at the time, former Chief Justice of the Nova Scotia Provincial and Family Courts, said it didn't happen. That they fabricated a story to create a hero to get public sympathy. I think that's a big story. And I think the interesting thing, Todd, is to see if the media picks up on any of this.
Well, I've had the book for 3 days, and I've did my best to get through the 500 and some pages. But I'm going to delve into it deeper, and we'll have you back, Paul. How's that sound?
Well, read the Curran letter if you haven't got to it yet, and there's lots to talk about there.
Okay, and again, people can book all bookstores and online. Just a reminder where
you
people
get it
can
anywhere.
As simple as that. Get it anywhere.
It's widely available.
Okay, Paul. Real pleasure, my friend. We'll have you back.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
That's Paul Palango. The book's called Anatomy of a Cover-Up, The Truth About the RCMP and the Nova Scotia Massacres. We'll be back. All right, Canada's tourism industry might be in for a boost as Canadians boycott the United States and spend their travel dollars closer to home this year. Joining us to chat with us is Kiefer Van Mulligen, a senior economist at the Conference Board of Canada and author of this report in which I'm referencing. Kiefer, hello.
Hello, good morning.
Absolutely. So aside from this, I would think that you at the Conference Board have no shortage of things to have your eye on with tariffs and the all that's going on right now. Lots and lots to keep your eye on the ball here, right?
It's been an interesting time for sure, and it can change on a dime.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about the tourism side of it and how this. Tell us about some of the more interesting aspects of the report. First of all.
Yeah. Well, the report is we looked at whether if Canadians aren't traveling to the United States, what would it look like if they chose to travel at home instead, domestically, and what the economic benefit, the scale of that economic benefit, what it could look like. So, kind of accounting for the fact that we are expecting the economy to weaken overall. So people might travel a bit less overall, and people might choose to travel overseas to non-U.S. countries as well. But we still think it'll be a net positive for domestic tourism. So, we're talking several $1 billion, and even with more conservative assumptions, we still expect a net positive this year.
Wow, I can imagine some of these U.S. communities, specifically border towns, must be just dying right now, I would think.
Yeah, you hear about that like anecdotally already, particularly border towns, like you say, and even states where Canadians make up a huge percentage of the tourists, places like California and Maine, Florida.
Yeah, I'm from St. John, New Brunswick, and going to Bangor was a regular thing, and going to Bangor and shopping at outlets, and just what every second license plate you'd see would be a Canadian license plate, and I've heard anecdotally, as you mentioned, that is pretty much dried up at this point, and that business is gone, and it's got to be devastating for those communities. But to your point, good for us, right? Good for us here in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, tourism might end up being one of the brighter spots in the economy this year, and for this reason. So, I mean, other industries are facing tariffs, and it's one way we can kind of support Canadians.
All right. How about Americans coming here and anti-U.S. sentiment? That's a concern, I would think.
I think the Canadian government anyway has been pretty strategic in not trying to alienate American citizens, and have focused their rhetoric mostly on the policies and the tariff policies. So hopefully Americans still feel welcome to come here, because they are Canada's largest inbound source market. So that's not going to change overnight. So hopefully we can maintain most of those visitors. Hopefully they still feel welcome to come. Yeah.
How about targeting markets or marketing and diverting or pivoting from marketing for like groups like Discover Halifax or these tourism boards? Is there an effort to reach out to Canadians in other parts of the country to attract them?
Oh, I think definitely, yeah. There's a marketing push that's probably more tilted towards domestic markets now, or even kind of overseas markets, trying to people who might have otherwise traveled to the U.S. We could potentially capture some of those folks and bring them to Canada instead. I know there's a lot of discontent in places like Europe. In terms of discussion about annexing Greenland has alienated people. So a lot of those countries have updated their travel advisories for the United States, things like that. So yeah, domestic marketing pivot for sure. And that's also supported by kind of a change in flight capacity. So we see fewer flights connecting to the United States and more flights between Canadian destinations to support that, yeah.
I would think for the business traveler that has to go to the United States, this is a lot of stress. This is a stressful time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's canceled. Some conferences have been canceled, some major conferences, and people who are looking to book a conference might hesitate if some of their audience doesn't feel comfortable traveling. So potentially there's a little bit of a benefit there, but I think it's too early to tell for sure if there's going to be a surge in business travel to Canada, for example. But we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, and the exchange on the dollar as well. It's going to the States is expensive right now, so that's another benefit here, right? Obviously, is that exchange that's a selling feature.
Yeah, that's always a factor, and the dollar is low compared to the Canadian dollar is low compared to its historical average with the U.S. dollar. It's improved a little bit since the fall, but that'll still be a factor in Canadians' travel decision making, particularly if the economy weakens and unemployment ticks up or the outlook is uncertain. Nobody knows what's going to happen for the rest of the year, so you might decide to take a more cost-effective trip closer to home rather than go to the States.
Do you think that this is sustainable after, at some point this tariff war will end and the government will likely change? We don't know how long it'll take in the United States for the political landscape to swing back, but the pendulum will swing back. But what about keeping some of these patterns long-term? Is that possible, or is this short-term?
That is the really interesting question, and we're trying. We sent out a survey to kind of get at that a little bit, but so we asked Canadians whether they would feel comfortable taking a leisure trip to the U.S. At some time in the next few years. And this survey was taken in late April, and 2/3 said they were pretty unlikely to take a trip, in the next few years. And that was taken from one moment in time, and like you say, tempers will probably cool over time, but that does speak to some persistence. We're thinking that this year for sure, and next year we might see some improvement or some normalization. But from today, it looks like it could persist into next year even. Yeah.
Okay, is the report available online? I'm assuming that it would be available for public consumption, Kiefer?
Yeah, it's free to look at on the Conference Board of Canada's website.
Okay, Kiefer, great chat. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good day.
All right, take care. Kiefer Van Mulligen, senior economist at the Conference Board of Canada and author of the report. And yes, look, you can imagine how difficult this would be for U.S. communities. And specifically, towns like Bangor would be just absolutely dying, I would think. Because I wouldn't... the proximity to the United States right now is not what it was, but if you're living in a border community, I would definitely stop going across the border. Just because of the fear of questioning. You never know you hear these horror stories about people and getting their phones taken from them and border agents going through their social media and interrogating people and taking them into interrogation rooms and holding them for hours and hours. The stress is not worth it. The risk is not worth it to save a bit of money on gas or for whatever reason you would be going into the States. Look, that's not everybody, but that would be certainly on the mind of a lot of people. And anecdotally, I've heard that the traffic is way down in many of these border communities. All right, the Friends of Halifax Common continues to demand HRM must stop further expenditures on the Robie Street widening. We'll talk about this when we come back. All right, folks, I'm going to read an email in relation to the call-in segment and the guest that we had earlier in the show, HRM Mayor Andy Fillmore. And, of course, it's in connection with the motion which the mayor will table tomorrow at Regional Council, calling for a temporary pause and review of new bike lane design and construction contracts. A lot of feedback on this today, a lot of calls, lots of emails. This one from Carlos. Carlos says, I'm not anti-bicycle lanes, routes, as rider safety should be everyone's concern. However, spending transportation dollars wisely, moving the most people now and into the future is my priority. While active transportation has benefits, especially locally, it will never replace vehicles and public transportation for our broad geography and infrastructure limits. That thought is an unrealistic pipe dream that should be put to rest. A major problem is the lack of transportation coordination among city staff and a shared vision. They seem to work in silos. The email goes on to say, I have attended many active transportation planning meetings and talked with city employees in charge. I have found they mostly work in isolation from the rest of the traditional transportation staff. My observation is that many are avid proponents of cycling versus proponents of all forms of city transportation. I have even talked with a few who seem to be anti-vehicle transportation. To me, cycling lane planning need to be better coordinated, focused, and completed versus partially completed throughout the city. Spending needs to be more closely monitored and coordinated with vehicle and public transportation. Where cycling lanes and safety structures impact vehicular traffic, like reducing vehicle lanes in major streets, measures should be out in place to mitigate the negative impact on traffic flow. For example, left turning traffic lights arrows can help maintain traffic flow. Comes from Carlos. So there's obviously a lot of information there, and I appreciate the email, Carlos, and appreciate your thoughts. I guess my takeaway is this. I think that this motion is a good one on behalf of the mayor. And I'm trying to be as open-minded as I can about this. I'm not a cyclist. I once was. I talked about this earlier in the show. And if I were younger and there were active transportation lanes and modes of transportation, I admit I would be motivated to use them. Not now at this stage of my life because of a variety of reasons. But if I were younger, I definitely would have. I would also say that I would not drive a bike in Halifax, even if I were younger, without bike lanes, because it's just, in my opinion, it's far too dangerous. It's just the traffic flow, the congestion, all of it is just it's far too dangerous for me. So I get it, folks. Your own personal experience and your own situation and your own life experience and your own situation is always going to be dominant when considering these things. Council's job at large, and the mayor said that he represents the entire city at large. He does not represent a district. Council's job when it comes to this is to try and come up with a policy that works for the entire municipality, the entire community long term. Not special interest groups, not individual interest, but at large. Now, you balance that, of course, with the district that you represent, and this is what democracy is all about. You represent your constituents, or do you represent the community at large? And the reality is you balance both of those. So if I'm a councillor like we had on today, Billy Gillis and Nancy Hatling, who represent outlying areas, Billy Gillis, Lower Sackville, Beaver Bank, Nancy, Prospect Road, St. Margaret's. My philosophy might be differently than somebody like Sean Cleary, who represents people in the peninsula, the Quinpool Road area, and other councillors who represent the downtown core, or Dartmouth, Sam Austin, people like that. So collectively, council needs to develop a policy that makes sense. Now, here's, to me, is the key component to all of this, is the costs are clearly spiraling out of control and have spiraled out of control. And we're talking $25 million originally, what the plan was, to $100 million, and that's all numbers only going to go up. And at some point, you need to, I think, press pause and have a look at this and make sure that your money that you're spending is money well spent and well directed. And that was one of Andy Fillmore's points was, look, let's look at the plan itself. Let's press pause. Let's develop a better plan that is more up to date. This plan was developed during the pandemic, based on pandemic patterns. And let's have a new look at this. We have, of course, Cogswell Interchange and the Windsor Street Exchange and major projects going on. And I think that it makes sense that it's time to press pause and to have a look at all of this and to analyze it and to develop a plan that is going to benefit everybody at large. And I understand that if you're a cyclist, you're going to want bike lanes. That only makes sense. And if you're not, you don't. I think that is generally the way that we think as individuals. But, again, we rely on politicians and council to make these decisions. So I think that when all is said and done, I think that I support Andy Fillmore's motion. And it doesn't mean that bike lanes are not going to happen, but I think that it means that plan it in coordination with transit. Look, if you were to have one of the two things, active transportation network or a good, robust transit network, I think I would take the transit network before the active transportation network. That would be my opinion. And again, Andy Fillmore basically said that. The mayor said that, look, we need to have transit working for everybody. So just my take on this. This email from Ron says, Andy is right on this one. A pause is the first nail in the coffin of this expensive venture. The priority ranking has to be vehicles, buses, walking, and finally bikes. Too expensive for a small vocal group of bikers. All right, let's see. This one from Lee says, you would have used, I already read that email earlier. This one from Emma. Emma says, I want to thank Gloria McCluskey for bringing up the accessibility aspect of the bike lanes. Due to concrete protected bike lanes along streets like Hollis and Water Streets and others, accessible buses can no longer drop wheelchair ramps to the sidewalk at any location along the street. The wheelchair ramps do not reach over the bike lane to the sidewalk. They have to drop off people where there are gaps or at bus stops, which completely defeats the point of a door-to-door accessible bus and may require folks with disabilities to walk or roll farther than they're comfortable with. Thanks for sending that email along. Ken says this, it's very simple to solve the complete bike lanes mess. Have a plebiscite. I guarantee that the people don't want that and that the price goes with it. That comes from Ken. Interesting. Plebiscites cost a lot of money. The best time to do that, I would think, would be during an election, because you could slide it in instead of having to go through the expense of a plebiscite. I read this from the Chronicle Herald earlier. It was in the Chronicle Herald this morning. The Halifax Cycling Coalition is not happy with Andy Fillmore's efforts to pause new bike lane projects. A quote from Dave Truman, chairman of a coalition that has 200 official members and has a newsletter circulation of around 1,700, says, I am flummoxed and disgusted. A little-known fact is that Halifax has the second highest rate of active transportation of all the cities in Canada. Why aren't we building upon that rather than trying to tear it down? And Andy Fillmore says that we're not trying to tear it down. We're just trying to build it out that makes sense. And Pat says this via email in relation to that. He said, did you say there are only 200 members in the bike group? 200 bikers in a city of 400,000? That doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, Pockwalk Road has no sidewalk or shoulders for children to get to school safely. This one from Sandy says, finally someone in HRM has a brain. Fillmore for mayor, go Andy, lead the way. This one from Glenn says, tough call on bike lanes. My concern is automobile ownership is slowly getting too expensive for more and more people, or the working poor. The transit system is inefficient and slow, so for many cycling is their better option. You can't fix it. It's impossible unless we dump more money into transit or bike lanes. And let's see. Do I have any more? This one from Lee says, I'm on board with Fillmore and pause in bike lanes. It's actually beyond time for a referendum on bike lanes. Let the people decide once and for all. If the councillors think the public want them, they have nothing to fear. That comes from Lee. And this one from David says, it's fantastic to once again see Andy Fillmore's willingness to have difficult conversations in the best interest of Haligonians. The skyrocketing cost of bike lanes should be concerning to all councillors, not just the mayor. Mayor Fillmore's common sense approach to delivering core services has galvanized my support for him, a sentiment which is gaining much momentum in the community. Bravo, Mayor Fillmore. So there are some of the emails that I've received. This one here from Dan. I'll read this one. He just sent it along. Said, I frequent Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, and they have a huge cycling community. There, the cyclists share the sidewalks with pedestrians. It seems to work just fine there. If you are approaching a pedestrian, you simply slow down and announce you are passing on their left or right, just like vehicles in traffic. When there is slow vehicles in front of you, you simply slow down and then continue when the road is clear. Comes from Dan. Interesting email, Dan. That really is. Utilizing sidewalks, I don't know, perhaps you could partition a portion of the sidewalk, but I think that might be a good alternative, actually. Thanks for sending it along. There's some emails, folks, for you. By the way, if you want to send me an email, todd.vino@rci.rogers.com is the way to do so. Again, todd.vino@rci.rogers.com. That's the way to send me emails. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks to Vanessa Van Ness as well on the other side of the glass at the control board. Doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.